great start, aren't we? Okay, that seems to be better. Okay. Hello, world, and welcome to Free Build Friday. Tonight, as you may have read by the title, I'm going to be building the Master Grade RX-0 Unicorn Gundam. Now, Unicorn Gundam is a design that has appealed to me for, I think I discovered it in 2010. It was still fairly new. I mean, it's still fairly new now, but it was much newer then. They're like 2 or 3 years old. It appealed to me as like, I saw it and was like, that's fucking cool. Because it's at first it doesn't look like a Gundam, but it transforms and then it looks like a Gundam, and that's I don't know. It just vibes with me. It's a badass design, and I've always wanted a kit of it. And you know, now I'm an adult with adult money. I'm doing more Gundam builds. So I was like, you know what? Fuck it, let's do this. So bought me a Master Grade Unicorn Gundam. I've heard mixed things about this kit, but I'll be the judge of it myself. So, this is definitely, given the size of this thing, this is going to be a multi-part build. My plan at this time is to build tonight, tomorrow, and then if necessary, Monday night as well. So that's pre-build Friday, snap together Saturday, and then model kit Monday as needed. And we'll see if I need more after that. I'm just going to try to do, 2-3 hours per stream. Not too much, but we'll see where we end up. So, with that said, let's dive in. Obviously, first off is the box. Nice big art, nice glorious art of the unicorn in destroy mode here, with unicorn mode in the background, doing its thing. Couple of, I don't actually know the lore of Unicorn Gundam, so I don't know what those suits are in the background that are Zeon or Zeon adjacent, but a couple of those. Same art right here on the bottom. On the side, we've got the rundown of, it's just a bunch of action features and poses, unicorn mode and destroy mode, and then the other side, some like technical details about the in-universe details, and I think comparisons to the previous Master Grade version Ka. So, let's unbox this thing. There. I have actually opened this once before just to look at the content, but whew, that's gorgeous. We have quite a lot going on here. I honestly don't think I could even fit this. I could definitely not fit this all on my table, so just going to remove the bags. Let's get a picture of this. That was a good picture. It'll do. Got the instruction book, and that should tell me what frames I need at what time. There's no way I'm going to be building this, fitting all this on my table. These are other kits in the uniform, other robots, other mobile suits in the unicorn. His unicorn's timeline. Actually, these are also. Excuse me. I apologize. Let's see. Over here we have RX. Yeah, the evolution of RX units. The RX-78, RX-178, Gundam Mark II, RX-93, Victory Gundam, and it leads to the RX-0 Unicorn Gundam. Then over here, some more features from this timeline, this area of the timeline, Unicorn itself, other adjacent suits, Razel, Stark Jigen, Lodo, and then the opposing side is Sinanju. Okay, so those are Gira Zulus, I see. Okay. And this thing, okay. Korea. I think I've seen like a model of that and didn't know what it was, so now I know, so that's neat. Okay, this is a couple of parts that aren't going to be needed. This is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 frames. These building guidelines. After the stickers. Do we want lines or not? I can't tell. I don't think so. I don't really like stickers, so I'll deal with them. I'll deal with those later, maybe. Just cut and then sand down. Yeah, building techniques. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, it tells you what frames you'll need for a specific portion of the build. So we'll start with the body unit. I'll need frames A, D, I, and M. Let's go get started here. I am just over here. Let me point the camera in my general direction. Just so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just trying to sort these out. There's a lot of frames here. Lots going on. Here's the last big thing I built. Esther. Ah, I didn't realize people were talking. Hello there. See if I can paint over what I've got here. I can't easily show you what I've got, but let's see. That's what I'm working with. It's a lot of frames. I'll post pictures. I'll try to post pictures. You know what I can do? I can take a picture with my phone and hold my phone up to the camera, and then. Oh, I just realized you didn't see this. That's right. I had to. You didn't see what I just did because I was on the wrong camera view. Whatever. Here's all my frames. My bags. It ain't great, but it doesn't matter. So I need frames A, D, I, and M. In any sort of order. C, N, and A is the cycle frame. E, M or N? M. That's O. That's D. I've got A, I, and M. Oh, that's N. I didn't. Damn it. Wait. Damn it. I didn't need this one after all. Off to a great start. But I needed the other one, so that's fine. it. These are not polycaps. Y'all can hear me, right? Just making sure. I don't know if I'm on a delay or not. Hold my hand here. Let's test. Okay, not too much of a delay. Alright, whatever. Alright, let's go get started here. ADI and AM. Start the body. What's this bit say?
Take a shower.
Why is my stream so... It's only like getting the second half of your statement. That's weird. I don't know why it's not reading your statements off correctly. Oh, your take a shower. That's fine. Just making sure. Pay for A10. Okay. Right off the bat, it says don't cut off this part. And alrighty. What was I gonna watch? What the hell?
Reload.
Test, how's that? Shouldn't be.
I mean.
You only getting half the audio? Because I'm only getting half the audio. Like from the bot, I mean. I was gonna watch. Cue that up, and
I can actually hear you.
That one. Okay. Cameras.
I'm on mobile app ATM, so I'm probably lagging harder.
Okay, as long as I know people are here.
Happy Pride Month, everyone. I know that some of my viewers may find this topic controversial, but I hope that even if you do, you will stick around and watch this relatively short video. I promise that it will be a lighthearted, respectful look at culture and video games, and what you learn, I think, may surprise you. So let's get right to it. I'm going to start the video with a statement that many of you viewers will find shocking, and that is this. In East Asia, generally speaking, being transgender is seen as less controversial than being gay. In the entire continent of Asia, where 60% of the world's population lives, the only state that has legalized gay marriage is Taiwan, and gay marriage has only been legal there since 2019. As of June 2023, there are bills proposing gay marriage in India, Japan, and South Korea. But as of the date of this video's release, neither Japan nor South Korea recognize same-sex unions, although China does to some extent. You may be surprised to hear that Japan doesn't even have nationwide protections against anti-gay discrimination. Some of the more progressive cities do, like Tokyo, but these protections exist at a local level and not at a federal level. However, in Japan and in South Korea and even in China, transgender people are legally allowed to change their gender after sex reassignment surgery as opposed to having gender changes banned outright. My beloved Taiwan has allowed transgender people to change legal gender since 2021 without any surgical requirements. Now, let's also be clear, more acceptance doesn't mean acceptable. Japan, in fact, requires those surgically transitioning to undergo mandatory sterilization, and there are still substantial stigmas in East Asia against transgender individuals. But at the very least, comparatively and culturally, there is more understanding and acceptance of trans people than one might expect from these traditionally minded countries where even gay marriage has yet to be legalized. This may seem strange. Why are these developed countries so unwilling to budge when it comes to gay marriage, but relatively open by comparison to transgender people and, more relevantly, transgender portrayals in media? In the West, generally speaking, trans portrayals are still uncommon, while gay and lesbian portrayals are virtually mainstream. Why is East Asia so different in this regard? What puts trans acceptance ahead of gay acceptance there? And what does this have to do with video games? Well, to answer these questions, we're going to be looking at different portrayals of trans characters in Japanese games while discussing the cultural context of those characters. In so doing, it is my hope that we will develop a nuanced understanding of trans portrayals and trans acceptance in Japan and East Asia. The term transgender and all the nuance that we currently associate with it is a relatively modern one, emerging as recently as the 1950s. The fundamental concept, however, of a transgender person, which is to say a person whose gender identity is different from their birth sex, is nothing new in history. I can see some of you shuddering through your computer screens. Don't worry, I won't force too much history on you this time. But I think it is still necessary to go through a little history here to develop a contextual understanding of what we are dealing with. Transgender people existed in just about every culture in some capacity. And while there are fascinating and robust histories of trans people in Europe and the Americas and Africa, we will be narrowing our scope specifically to the history of trans people in East Asia. East Asia, you see, has a very long history of transgenderism. You might be familiar, for example, with the long and sordid history of eunuchs in China. A eunuch is a castrated male, and they were at times thought of as being not entirely male nor female. In ancient China, like in many patriarchal societies, women were often considered unfit for the duplicitous and thoughtful work of statesmanship. Chinese history, of course, shows us that this is patently untrue. But let's not get sidetracked. A eunuch was seen as having all the benefits of the male mind and capability without a male's ambition for dynasty. Eunuchs were often given positions of great power, and eunuchs were also responsible for some of China's most dramatic historical occurrences, including one such an instance where a weak emperor saw the imperial harem, the women, fighting for political control of the state against the imperial eunuchs. You may also be familiar with how traditional Chinese theater and Japanese kabuki uses male actors to portray female characters, a practice that is not dissimilar to the Western practice of drag or the historical portrayal of female characters by male actors in Shakespearean plays, and might be thought of as trans-adjacent. Japan, in particular, has a curious relationship with transgenderism and gender nonconformity. Portrayals of transgender or at least gender nonconforming characters in media are commonplace to the point of being generally unremarkable because of Japan's long engagement with characters of male sex presenting as female gendered. Now, oddly enough, as far as video games are concerned, the arguable first two significant trans portrayals were both quirks of localization. Consider first everyone's favorite pink egg-spitting, bow-wearing dinosaur, Birdo. The English manual for Super Mario Bros. 2 mentions that Birdo thinks he is a girl, and that he'd rather be called Birdetta. In Japan, however, the game we know of as Super Mario Bros. 2 is Yume Kojo Doki Doki Paniku. In that game, Birdo is known as Catherine, and she's portrayed in that game as a cis female. She ended up with a male pronoun in the Super Mario Bros. 2 manual because her character was mistakenly switched during localization with the male-presenting character Ostro. The manual localizers rolled with it, and thus Birdo became trans. And that fateful decision by the manual localization team has caused trouble for Nintendo ever since. The male pronoun Taibo was corrected in the Game Boy Advance release of Super Mario Bros. 2, and the Japanese version of Super Smash Bros. Melee calls Birdo Catherine, and in a manner similar to the original manual, states that she prefers to be called Kathy. However, in Smash Bros. Brawl, Birdo's gender is stated as being indeterminate in both versions, and Birdo is described with the rather tone-deaf pronoun it. Birdo is stated to be female in the controversial Japan-only Wii game Captain Rainbow, but the European website for Mario Strikers Charged Football notes that Birdo is male. Now, some pundits consider Birdo to be a trans icon, but others consider Birdo to be an offensive caricature. Here's the thing about symbols, though. The origins of a symbol do not determine its meaningfulness. Something can become a symbol even if it wasn't intended to be that way. Aside from Birdo, another early trans character who is a product of localization is Poison, a character who made her first appearance in Final Fight, and whose portrayal as a trans character like Birdo is still inconsistent and at times unclear. Poison was designed by Akira Yasuda with the intention of creating, and I quote, a sexy female gang member to Final Fight. However, the Final Fight team was afraid that beating up women in their video game would cause trouble in North America, and so designer Akira Nishitani switched the female enemies in Final Fight from cisgender female to transgender. Poison's designer, Akira Yasuda, has stated that he still views Poison as a cisgender female in Japan, but as a transgender female in North America. Designer Akira Nishitani has stated on Twitter that in his personal view, Poison is a woman. Interpret that how you may. Street Fighter 4 producer Yoshinori Ono has allegedly stated that he considers Poison officially post-op transgender in North America and pre-op in Japan.
Right.
Remember the
chair.
distinction
This is
that
Bonagy
exists
Lynx,
by
I believe
law
is the
in
pilot's
Japan,
name.
though. Pre-op
I ain't painting
transgender
that.
women are not legally allowed to change gender. As such, Ono is telling us that he considers Poison to be legally male. And so Poison's canonical identity is still a bit muddy, and portrayals of her characters at times can be downright puzzling. Here's an anecdote that I personally experienced. I played very briefly the Street Fighter Duel gacha game, released originally by Topjoy, Tencent, and Capcom for China. There was an event in that game when I played it which required you to use only female characters to get an achievement. Your team could have Chun-Li, Cammy, Sea Viper, Juri, Makoto, Sakura, and Ibuki, but not Poison. She didn't count for the achievement. Frustrating though it is, at the end of the day, not unlike Birdo, Poison as a fictional character with a nebulous background is what we make of her.
Alright, so we got Bonagy Lynx in there.
It doesn't really matter what Akira Nishitani thinks about North American Poison. I think, though, that Poison's portrayal as a trans woman and all of the foibles involved in that portrayal brings us right back to our discussion at large. Japanese media features trans-presenting people quite nonchalantly, despite the stigma against trans people in the society, and in an especially peculiar way considering that portrayals of homosexuality are still relatively taboo by comparison. And a part of that, as we discussed, is Japan's history of gender non-conforming portrayals in traditional media. There is, however, a second part of this puzzle that we must consider, and that is the cultural philosophy of conformity in Japan. And so to discuss that topic, let us talk a little bit more about everyone's favorite trans character, Bridget. East Asian cultures, and this is not just limited to Japan, are traditionally collectivist and communal. There are many historical theories about this, which we won't get into, I promised, after all. But it involves rice-based communal agriculture, early East Asian philosophy, and... No, stop. Okay, I'm good. We're good. The more collectivist nature of East Asia, particularly when contrasted against the more individualist natures of the West, means that individual conformity to a status quo of societal behavior is expected and at times enforced. In other words, while we in the West often associate collectivism with progressivism and individualism with conservatism, in East Asia the phenomenon is generally reversed. After all, if one defines progressivism as the advancement of new ideas over tradition and conservatism, little c, as the adherence to tradition over advancement of new ideas, then sticking to a highly conformist collectivist society in East Asia is more conservative than it is progressive. In East Asia, breaking the status quo and being individualist is non-conforming and progressive. And yes, I understand I'm omitting a lot of nuance here with regards to collectivism and individualism, but I hope the well-versed among you will forgive me for providing only the 101 here. Being gay or a lesbian is highly looked down upon in traditional East Asian society, even absent the philosophical influences of the West, which crept into Japan and thereby the rest of Asia post-Meiji Restoration, because it is non-conforming. A man and a man together, or a woman and a woman together, breaks the status quo. Some breaking of the status quo and exploration of this nature might even be tolerated when one is younger, but individuals are expected to eschew nonconformance and get with the program as they enter adulthood. Gender transitioning, however, is a behavior of conformity. If one's behaviors and mannerisms and internal identity is the opposite of one's appearance and gender, that might be considered non-conforming to society. By changing one's outside to match one's inside, there is no longer a visible dissonance, and as such one becomes conforming. As such, even though transgender people are still considered non-traditional, the act of transitioning itself, or presenting as transitioned to conform to societal expectations, conforms to traditional values.
That's crazy.
And that brings us to the fascinating story of Bridget. Bridget is a trans character from the series Guilty Gear, and she, a little like Birdo or Poison, was not quite written as a trans character from the outset. Bridget's in-game story, in a nutshell, is this. Bridget was born the younger of a pair of twin boys in a town where a superstition stated male twins brought misfortune upon a family and the town. The townsfolk were so convinced of this that when any male twins were born, the younger would be taken and put to death or given up for adoption. Bridget's family, however, being wealthy aristocrats, chose to hide the younger twin and raise the younger twin as a daughter instead of a son, thereby hiding the child's birth sex from the townsfolk. This younger son is Bridget, and from the outset of Bridget's story, you can see the very specific Japanese culture of conformity leaking out from society into media. Bridget follows her parents' directives, understanding that her presenting as female is for her own safety and good.
16.
However, she strives to prove to the townsfolk that their superstitions are unfounded. In so doing, she decides to set off to prove her manliness, only to discover in the next game that perhaps it wasn't manliness she was seeking, but belonging. The most recent iteration of Bridget has her settling in and understanding her transgender identity, with Daisuke Ishiwatari, the creator of Guilty Gear, clarifying that Bridget self-identifies as a woman, having faced parts of herself that she has tried to ignore. But consider Bridget's road to self-realization. It was a journey of conforming to societal expectation as much as it was a rebellion against that expectation. This is, in part, the difference between Eastern and Western portrayals of transgender characters in video games. In a Western game, or in fact in Western society in general, the act of changing one's gender to fit in and find belonging is seen as an unwelcome encroachment by certain conservative individualists. Whereas in Eastern society, and this extends even as far as the Muslim world, if one behaves opposite of their gender, it is conforming and thereby welcome by conservative collectivists for the non-conforming individual to adjust themselves to fit the society around them. Consider, for example, the laws of the Islamic Republic of Iran. In Iran, same-sex relations are illegal. Same-sex activities are punishable by imprisonment or even execution. You can be executed in Iran for being gay. However, you can be trans in Iran. If you get sex reassignment surgery, you are legally allowed to change gender in Iran. In fact, the government even partially subsidizes your gender-affirming surgery. This doesn't make life easy as a trans person in Iran, far from it. But it does show how vast the difference can really be between individualistic societies and collectivist societies when it comes to LGBT acceptance. And to drive this cultural lesson home, we will take a look at one final case study. Let's look at a character that many of us North Americans may not even realize was trans at all. Let's look at Vivian from Paper Mario, The Thousand-Year Door. Mooney, I can hear you say. I played Thousand-Year Door. In fact, it was one of my favorite games. I don't recall any transgender plotline in that game at all. Well, Thousand-Year Door is a very curious game.
I see.
In that the story arc of an
what's supposed to attach this?
playable character, Vivian,
okay.
is handled completely differently depending on the version of the game that you played.
So much
Thousand-Year Door was developed by Intelligent Systems, produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, and published by Nintendo.
D14.
In the original Japanese, Vivian is described as being a boy who looks like a girl or an effeminate boy, something akin to the Japanese idea of otokonoko, a male girl. She is mocked relentlessly by her older sister Beldam, who misgenders her and calls her a crossdresser, much to her chagrin. And part of her story is learning confidence in herself and standing up to her sisters. In the original version of the game, Vivian is not explicitly stated to be transgender, and her identity, in a very Japanese manner, is left vague and up to one's own interpretation. This characterization of Vivian extends to the French and Spanish versions as well. However, if you played an English or German version of Thousand-Year Door, any reference whatsoever to Vivian's gender nonconformity are completely erased, and her sister's prodding insults are changed from transphobic statements to bullying over Vivian's general appearance. Interestingly enough, if you played the game in the sole remaining version in Italian, Vivian is very openly portrayed as a trans woman, and in the in-game description, it even states that she's proud to have turned into a woman. This concept of an effeminate boy or a boy who looks like a girl is very consistent with Japanese portrayals of gender non-conforming or trans characters, and this is, again, due to societal expectations of conformity. In Japan and much of the East, being a so-called effeminate boy is less disruptive than being transgender, which is less disruptive than being gay. The German and English versions, in the meantime, handle Vivian from the perspective of what a Japanese developer or localizer might see as being a more compelling narrative in individualist societies. Which is to say, instead of Vivian struggling with identity and belonging, she suffers from an inferiority complex. She isn't seeking to be accepted for who she is seeking to be good enough to merit a placement in a hierarchy. And what does the Italian version teach us? Well, the Italian version teaches us that we cannot just group every Western country into the West and still have a nuanced perspective on cultures. In learning today about Eastern portrayals of trans and gender non-conforming characters in media, let us not forget that catch-all terms like Eastern and Western have their limits. Let us also keep in mind that I am not advocating a collectivist East good, individualist West bad mentality. Denmark is more socially progressive than Italy, which is more socially progressive than the United States, which is more socially progressive than Taiwan, which is more socially progressive than Japan, which is to say simply, it's not that one culture is bad and another is good, it's that cultures, even neighboring ones, are different, and each approaches complicated topics like gender differently. When we understand the reasons why different cultures understand topics like gender in the ways that they do, we can begin to build a more understanding and empathetic world
Unicorn mode
together.
or for destroy mode, I assume, but that doesn't.
If you watched my video on JRPGs, you may remember how I noted that Western critiques of complicated ideas like capitalism tend to lack nuance, especially when compared to Japanese portrayals which tend to be very subtle by comparison. In researching this video, I came across quite a number of criticisms from Western commentators regarding Birdo and Poison and Bridget and Vivian. Some commentators find offense with how game developers waffle over whether or not to include their characters' trans histories in their portrayals. Other commentators are unhappy with how developers seem hesitant to outright state that a character is trans, in the way that Western games have a tendency to do by putting a trans flag in the game or having a character declare their identity aloud. But I hope that after watching this video, you will see where these more muted, subtle, unspoken portrayals of trans characters are coming from. This kind of media, these kinds of characters, are how Japan explores gender identity within its cultural bubble. These kinds of portrayals are seeds that yield fruit. Japan has a very different mentality and culture development than that of the United States or Italy for that matter, and it is developing a nuanced understanding of gender in its own way. See Bridget, who has ascended from otokonoko status into full-fledged, out-and-out trans woman. It is natural for a person to use the lens of their own culture to see the rest of the world. After all, for many of us, it is the only lens that we have. And I know that we Americans are quite notorious for this myopic behavior. But I hope that this video has given you a brief look through a different lens and helped you to understand why exactly Japanese portrayals of trans characters are as they are. Japan and really much of East Asia is slowly moving towards a better understanding of
The
itself.
cores coming together.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what being trans is all about? The rainbow road might be long and perilous, but at the end of it, you can be sure that there is a finish line. I hope that you enjoyed this shorter Pride Month special. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please also sub and check out the Patreon if you like hearing me ramble. I've been your host, Mooney, and thank you for tuning in to Moon Channel.
Okay. Do this twice. Where's A14? Oh, Jesus, that is a tiny little piece there. That is teensy. Can you see this? It's this little bit right here under my finger. If you follow the frame, they make an L, and it's just that tiny round part. That's all I'm cutting out. $8.25. This is extremely intricate. All right, what next? Let's do few. No, it's not.
Space. When the original version of this attraction opened in the Magic Kingdom in 1975, it transformed not only Tomorrowland, but the wider theme park industry as well. Using new computer technology to track multiple trains across its layout, Space Mountain helped to pioneer the modern roller coaster, showing that technology had advanced to the point where larger capacity considerations could be implemented. Still, what also made this attraction so innovative wasn't just its technical capabilities, but also its theme. Housed inside its iconic dome, no one had ever experienced a roller coaster like this before. Flying around in the dark as projections of stars and asteroids zipping by made it feel like you were traveling in a rocket through space. In fact, it was so popular, numerous other parks attempted to emulate the experience with attractions such as Black Hole at Alton Towers, Space Center at Phantasialand, and Euroset at Europa Park, among many others. Of course, with its immense popularity, Disney would build a new, smaller version for Disneyland in 1977 and would bring versions of this to other parks as well. The version in Tokyo would open with the park in 1983, based on the Disneyland layout, and the Hong Kong version would do the same in 2005, but would instead be a clone of the new Disneyland track that was installed the same year as part of a rebuild. So, what's the best version of this attraction? They're all iconic in one form or another, but there's two that really stand out from the rest. The first is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind in Epcot, which you cannot convince me is not just another Space Mountain. If you removed the IP, very little of the experience would actually change, and you would be left with another roller coaster through space. However, the focus of this video is going to be the version of the attraction that opened in Disneyland Paris in 1995, which manages to distinguish itself not just through its intense track layout, but also through its unique Jules Verne theme. The original version of the attraction, known as Space Mountain de la Terre à la Lune, or in English, From the Earth to the Moon, was arguably Disney's best version of the ride, which has unfortunately been gutted through a massive rebranding, and most recently, turned into a dumping ground for a permanent Star Wars overlay. So let's dive into one of Disney's saddest downgrades, and explore what was once an iconic symbol of how great Disney Imagineering used to be.
That's not right. Oh, that's good.
A quick reminder, but if you enjoy videos like these, you can do me a favor by hitting the like button. It's no secret that Disneyland Paris, which opened with the name of Euro Disney in 1992, didn't meet the financial expectations of the company. In fact, this extravagantly detailed and incredibly expensive park was losing money in its first few years of operation, with attendance being far lower than predicted and guest spending not meeting expectations. There are a lot of reported reasons for why this was the case, but high-profile criticism of the time has highlighted how this park was perceived
aside
as
for a minute while I do some more.
imperialism. This, in addition to not respecting French culture and tradition, and not understanding European holiday practice, all contributed to its failure in its early years. However, one thing that I can recognize the park for doing is opting for Discoveryland instead of the usual Tomorrowland. In the late 1970s, Tony Baxter, a high-profile Imagineer who had a large hand in the development of Big Thunder Mountain, Splash Mountain, and a number of other attractions, conceptualized an expansion for Disneyland called Discovery Bay, inspired heavily by Jules Verne and existing as a steampunk-style land with multiple attractions. While many of these ideas would manifest throughout Disney parks in one form or another, Discoveryland is a great spiritual successor, and really made sense for Euro Disney since Verne was such an influential French writer. One opening day attraction included an ambitious Circle Vision 360 film known as the Visionarium, which was later cloned to other parks as the Timekeeper. Other attractions included a walkthrough exhibit of the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and versions of other typical Tomorrowland attractions, such as Autopia and the Astro Orbiter, but with a retro-futuristic interpretation. Discoveryland also opened with Star Tours and Captain EO, which thematically doesn't really make any sense, but at the very least they were hidden away in highly themed show buildings that fit with the overall aesthetic. However, the land itself was conceptualized with something much more ambitious in mind, anchored by a massive building known as Discovery Mountain, which would have been twice the size of Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom. Inside, it would have been designed around a mysterious island based on Verne's novel The Mysterious Island, and under its dome, it would house a number of large attractions.
This way?
Originally, the Nautilus walkthrough was conceptualized for this space. It would have also included an underwater restaurant. Other attractions include a drop tower coming out of a volcano, based around Journey to the Center of the Earth, as well as a clone of Epcot's Horizons. Most notable, however, was Discovery Mountain itself, an indoor roller coaster existing as a version of Space Mountain, but obviously themed to versions from the Earth to the Moon. The plan was too ambitiously expensive, and so Discoveryland obviously opened without it, but the idea clearly lived on.
Okay.
Your destination, outer space. Your speed, astronomical. Your closest encounter, asteroids. Between the Earth and the Moon lies the adventure. Space Mountain, the greatest ride in the universe, at Disneyland Paris.
As the park struggled financially, Disney really needed to introduce a brand new and exciting headliner that would draw in the needed crowds. Working off of the Discovery Mountain concept, this version of Space Mountain was essentially the same thing, but had its own single-purpose show building. Opening in 1995, it absolutely did bring in the needed attendance, and the park finally turned a profit with its introduction that year. The exterior of the building is designed to look like a mountain cannon from which riders will be shot to the moon, and the attraction concept follows the Jules Verne novel pretty closely. On entering the queue inside the building, guests walk through Stellar Way, an open area where they could view the coaster flying through its track layout, interacting with and looping through its various elements.
Okay, this is
Before reaching the station, riders would move through a portion of the queue that is meant to be the
17
headquarters
and
of the Baltimore
18.
Gun Club, which was responsible for the construction of the cannon in the story. From here, the queue ends at the open-air station, which has an iconic steampunk design. The trains themselves were called moon trains, designed to look like 19th century vessels that aesthetically fit Verne's science fiction. Also notable is that these are the first trains to ever feature synchronized onboard audio, with a music piece specifically designed to coordinate with different moments in the track layout. Once the train departs the station, it curves around a bend and falls into a small dip, then moving upwards into the launch hill inside the cannon. The train parks and the side rotates open as if riders are being loaded into the barrel. The train then ascends a little bit further in and parks again. As the music continues building, it suddenly breaks into a new section and the train launches forward through the cannon into the darkness, cresting a hill and quickly descending down a left-banked turn past spinning asteroids. The train then flies through more asteroid fields and finishes this section of the track by twisting out of control through its first inversion, a sidewinder. It quickly snaps out of this into a transition that brings it through an asteroid mining machine from the novel, which is an element you can see pretty clearly from the queue. Almost immediately, the train blasts through an asteroid which uses smoke effects to simulate impact, and the train then continues descending to the right, flying past asteroids and moving through a corkscrew. Riders slow down quickly as they lose momentum and climb another small lift hill, with a projection of the moon with a face simulating their rapid approach. This may seem strange, but if you've ever seen the 1902 silent film adaptation of the novel known as A Trip to the Moon, this is what it is intended to reference. The train quickly crests the hill and descends again, flying through more asteroids and its final inversion, a cutback, before letting effects simulate burning in the atmosphere on the return to Earth.
That's right.
The train then pulls into a brake run through a machine called the electrotape velociter, which absorbs the momentum of the projectile train, and from here, riders pull back into the station. Space Mountain, from the Earth to the Moon, is certainly one of the more unique Disney coasters out there, and while its intensity with the launch and 3 inversions is more akin to Rock and Roller Coaster, and its intensity isn't for everyone, I think it made sense specifically for Disneyland Paris as a much-needed thrilling attraction. While there's a lot to love about the other versions of Space Mountain, the Jules Verne theming here is so unique and distinct from the others yet manages to still maintain that Space Mountain spirit. I also like how it successfully brought riders through such an interesting queue that let people look directly into the coaster track itself, which is such a unique element that could only happen in the Eisner era. Space Mountain from the Earth to the Moon was arguably not only the best version of Space Mountain, but was an example of the best that Imagineering had to offer. So, what happened to it, and why does it now exist with a permanent and half-baked Star Wars overlay? In 2005, the exterior of the dome was repainted, the interior changed, and the ride now renamed to Space Mountain Mission 2 as part of a refresh to remarket the attraction. With the failure of the obligatory Walt Disney Studios Park opening across the way in 2002, Disney's Paris resort found itself needing another financial boost to keep it afloat. And what better way to do so than introduce a brand new e-ticket? Or, I suppose in this case, changing out some signs and removing Space Mountain's interesting theming in favor of a more generic rebrand. Space Mountain certainly saved Disneyland Paris once, but it was stupid to think that a new coat of paint would do it twice. On entering the queue, fans of the previous ride would immediately notice that the former Stellar Way
is
was
not enjoying
now
the
closed,
fireworks.
removing what was
I'm
once
sorry,
an iconic
Spooky.
element of the experience. The theming and queue aesthetic itself also changed to be more akin to the generic Space Mountains found throughout the other parks. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it is disappointing because the Jules Verne theming was an interesting way to differentiate this version from the others, and the external steampunk ornamentation and canon were still in place, despite not playing into the story of the ride
lock.
anymore.
Okay.
The ride experience itself is also immediately different, using a new score composed by
that's
Michael
clever.
Giacchino, who also did the updated soundtrack for the new retracked Disneyland version
Sailor
as well.
Zombie Esther.
Admittedly,
He's high
I
AF
actually
right
prefer
now,
this
so
audio
he's
track
not
over
too
the previous
terribly
one
upset.
because it's just really good.
That's
But
good.
I wondered why he was so
As
jumpy.
for the interior itself, many of the elements, such as the asteroids, stayed the same, but this time used new lighting to make them feel more dynamic. Moving further in, former fans will notice that the asteroid mining machine was removed, and the lift hill where you approach
This time
the
last
moon
year, I was
replaced
visiting you
by the
guys.
projection of a supernova.
I missed that.
The area where you re-entered the Earth's atmosphere was also upgraded, using a much more effective lighting effect before then concluding again with the electrodevelocitor, which wasn't removed for whatever reason. While Space Mountain Mission 2 was not a bad version of the attraction and actually improved the impact of certain elements throughout the ride, many of the decisions made in this refurb were just strange, such as closing off Stellar Way or removing some of the Jules Verne thematic elements
Sorry, I'm
while
so
still
freaking
keeping many
awkward.
of the others.
But
It seems clear
It's
to me that a lot of
fine.
the positive
I am
lighting
also
changes
awkward.
would have made sense with
I am also awkward, so it does not mind. It does not mind. It does not matter to me. Oh, I'm about done with the torso. What do you know? Okay. D12 and 13, D16 and 17.
the previous theming. Still, while this new refurb of the ride stinks of late Eisner era cost cutting, you can also count on Bob Iger and Bob Chapek to somehow make things worse. The attraction closed in January of 2017 and reopened in May of the same year, introducing completely new trains, which you will notice are distinctly steampunk themed, and sporting a temporary overlay as Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the ride. By temporary, I mean that this Jules Verne themed structure with new appropriately themed trains has now been running this Star Wars overlay into 2023, which is ridiculously stupid. I'm very much a fan of overlays like these, as Hyperspace Mountain at Disneyland is a nice change for the month of May, and I really like the Haunted Mansion holiday at the end of the year. However, these temporary overlays are appropriately temporary, and are not at all better than the core experiences. While Space Mountain Mission 2 had its thematic issues, it's still a much stronger version than Hyperspace, which shoehorns in TIE Fighters, Star Destroyers, and X-Wings in a way that doesn't really gel with the pacing of the ride. Again, stuff like this is fine if it's a temporary or seasonal overlay, but it's clearly not a good fit for a ride it wasn't designed for. Is it not bizarre to walk into this Jules Verne-themed land and structure, only to experience a forgettable Star Wars overlay that has long outstayed its welcome? Like many things defined in this era shaped by Iger and Chapek, Hyperspace Mountain exists as a reminder that there's absolutely no care for the integrity of the theming or quality of the park experiences, as long as you can slap a marketable IP onto something. So, this is the story of Disneyland Paris' Space Mountain, which premiered as an incredibly unique attraction, not just because of its intensity, but because of its unique theming. It was then first rebranded cheaply, and has most recently been turned into a billboard for a film franchise that Disney has run into the ground. I hate how current leadership does not trust consumers to want to experience something cool, but instead had to slap some marketable gimmick onto it, resulting in the last half-decade of forgettable mid-tier attractions that leave a stain on the Disney Parks brand, once known for its abundant creativity and high quality. If you're frustrated and you agree that this is the wrong course for Disney to be on, then one way you can help change the narrative is by leaving a like if you haven't already done so, boosting this video and allowing this sentiment to gain more exposure. As always, if you enjoy this video or others on the channel, you can also hit the subscribe button with bell notification so as to be alerted to new videos as they release.
Doritos. They are all flamin' hot, but 1 in 4 chips are lemon flavored.
Wow.
Verdict scribe. Roulette asterisk.
Roulette Doritos. Need to get this part off because I didn't cut the nubs off cleanly enough. Of course, this is the one that's going to be stubborn. It's held on by this one peg right here that's a little small. I don't want to break it off. It's just enough flexibility in the rest of the parts that it's precarious. Not washed down, are you? Supposed to expand. Okay, that seems to be clean enough. Is there anything else I missed? That's supposed to be there. I guess that's it. Something about this part doesn't sit well. Okay. There we go. That's the back, right? Yeah, okay, that's the back. This is the front. Do something else on the other side here. Make sure I've got this right. Oh, I haven't cleaned this up yet, have I? Okay. This is quite the intricate build. This is leaps and bounds much more advanced than the MG RX-0 I built a few months ago. Of course, that was I determined that that was an old kit, so that's why that one was much easier. Damn it. Okay, put this piece on the back. I forgot to clean that piece up. Good job. Okay. Let's install the cover, the cockpit cover. So I believe the way this is supposed to work is it expands outward, and that will help the panels to fold down, yeah, something like that. All right, let's do this. D9, I12, I9. We'll get some more entertainment on in a minute. Just want to finish this up. it's a very thick nub. I 12 by 9. And 9. That goes there. No. Maybe? Okay, yeah. Okay. This goes like this. Make sure that's right. Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. And then piece D18 covers the chest. Okay, goes there, and this attaches there. There we go. Okay, I have a torso. That is very intricate. I don't think so. Okay, A, C, H, and R1 for the head. Put all these to the side. Make sure we're reading that right. A, C, H, and R1. Okay. There's R1. What does C look like? H. It's B. Let's see. It's B. O.
Mr. 1.6 is melting and hard crashing some PS5s.
Wow. FF16 is melting some PS5. That's crazy. That is, I don't know what to say to that. That's a very intense game. Oh, there we go. There's C.
Hyperbolic, but still.
That's fair. I'll allow it this time. Oh, great, water slides. I don't know what to do with those. The regular stickers, I don't know. The regular stickers, I can deal with. Water slides are a bitch, from what I hear tell. But they're better. What you gonna do? Okay. A, B, H, and R1. Gonna build us ahead. Gonna get ahead in life. Let's see what you sent me here. Now let's watch that.
Final Fantasy 16 came out a few days ago, and honestly, it's been doing gangbusters, critically and commercially. Looking at Metacritic right now, the Metascore sitting at an 88 from 117 critic reviews. The user score, while initially it was pretty low, eventually, once people started playing the game and more people started reviewing it, the score got to a pretty good 8.3, and so there's a lot of love surrounding this game. At the same time, there's also a lot of feedback where, you know, some people didn't jive with it as much because Final Fantasy 16 does deviate in some ways. It is a lot more action-focused. Past games in the series would either be turn-based or be a combination of real-time combat and those kind of RPG combat gameplay mechanics, but this game, it's all real-time combat.
I should know who that is. I can't. I'm not. I'm blanking. I recognize the name, but I can't place it.
Mister. Like a dragon.
Oh, maybe not. Heard of it, haven't played it. I'm supposed to. Damn it, you're making this real hard for me. Making this very difficult. Okay, this piece. C15. That's the mouth plate. For destroy mode, I believe. And H2 is the eyes. I was playing the video, wasn't I?
Score got to a pretty good 8.3, and so there's a lot of love surrounding this game. At the same time, there's also a lot of feedback where, some people didn't jive with it as much because Final Fantasy 16 does deviate in some ways. It is a lot more action focused. Past games in the series would either be turn-based or be a combination of real-time combat and those kind of RPG combat gameplay mechanics, but this game, it's all real-time combat. And then things like gear equipment and RPG elements are very minimal. It is more linear in terms of how its levels are designed. Some of the side quests people weren't feeling in terms of how tedious they could feel. And And the story, I haven't finished the game, but some people didn't like how the story ended, like it kind of falls off a little bit. But generally, there is a lot of love and a lot of positivity surrounding the game. I feel a lot of people just really loved the performance of Clive, the character from Ben Starr. A lot of people do like the combat and the gameplay and how majestic all of the set pieces are, just how epic everything is, and there's a lot of intrigue and some cool characters. So, there's a lot to love about this game, regardless of whether, this Final Fantasy is for certain players or not. And then commercially speaking, man, this game, it's selling pretty well for a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Keep in mind that this game didn't come out on any other platforms, unlike, say, Final Fantasy 15 at launch, and it is not cross-generation. It is PlayStation 5 exclusive. And last time we heard about how many PS5s have been sold and are out there was April 28th, 2023. And as of that date, the total sales of the console was 38.4 million, roughly 40 million is a good estimate. So when you consider all of these factors, the fact that Final Fantasy 16 as a PS5 exclusive managed to sell over 3 million copies during its launch week within the first 6 days is actually pretty damn impressive. That actually makes Final Fantasy 16 the fastest selling PlayStation 5 exclusive ever, while you do have stats for games like God of War Ragnarok that sold 5.1 million units in roughly the same time period. Keep in mind that God of War Ragnarok came out on PlayStation 4 as well, which had an install base of over 100 million players plus the PlayStation 5 install base. So the fact that Final Fantasy 16 managed to sell 3 million copies under its circumstances speaks to just how well this game will likely end up selling once it goes multi-platform, which is bound to happen once whatever exclusivity deal Square Enix worked out with
Let that
Sony
dry for a
is
bit,
over.
then I will.
So it's trending
Go
really
back.
well so far, which is great. The fact that it managed to match Final Fantasy VII Remake numbers with a smaller install base, or the fact that it managed to, get close to some of these major games like Spider-Man, the first God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, these major IPs, I mean, it speaks to just how well known the Final Fantasy IP is and how well the demo did when it comes to marketing the game. That demo, I think, probably sold a lot of pre-orders. It's probably what convinced a lot of people who were on the fence to be like, all right, let's pull the trigger on Final Fantasy 16. That demo, I think, was a demonstration for the best kind of marketing you can put out there, just letting the game speak for itself and let positive word of mouth spread if you're confident in your product. Now, all of that's great, but there is one aspect of the game that I feel I should talk about as a PSA for PlayStation 5 owners who might be concerned about their console overheating and crashing. This has never happened to me before, and unless I missed something, I don't remember any other game seeing PlayStation 5s crash and overheat like Final Fantasy 16 has been doing consistently enough across certain users. Signs of this happening were hinted at when Susie Hunter, who got a review copy for the game, tweeted out the following back in June 19th, 2023, before the review embargo lifted, before the Final Fantasy 16 came out. I'm playing a game that isn't out yet, where a boss fight made my PS5 overheat so much that it just turned off completely at the end of the fight. So if you guys plan on buying any new games in the near future for a day one PS5, make sure you clean it out thoroughly. Now, at the time, one could assume that this was either an isolated incident or that it's something that could get patched with some kind of day one patch, but post-launch, we've been seeing more reports that Final Fantasy 16 is overheating and crashing PS5 consoles completely. And it's been specifically reported that this only happens when you're utilizing the graphics mode instead of the performance mode. The graphics mode being the mode that pushes graphics and resolution to the max, but caps the frame rate at 30 frames per second. On performance mode, the frame rate is variable, and while it's not always a solid 60, it performs well enough where you get a smoother experience, and that's probably what most people went with. But for those who went with fidelity mode or graphics mode, yeah, enough people have been experiencing this hard crash and overheating of the PlayStation 5 where it can be a concern. On Reddit, you'll find a post from 5 days ago titled PS5 force shutting down without an overheating warning. Now, Susie had brought up the possibility that maybe it has to do with having to clean out dust from within the PlayStation 5, but this user reports that the PS5 is on the tabletop with lots of open space, so it's not in some crammed condition where it allowed the PS5 to overheat. There's very little dust buildup. I have never gotten any overheating warnings. I was playing in graphics mode, HDR, and when this scene played, and I'm not going to play the scene in case people haven't played this game, the fans went crazy and shut down instantly. It just happened so fast. Was this an actual overheating issue or a potential bug I just encountered? Notice how there isn't much going on in this scene. That's another thing worth noting. This overheating and crash seems to happen in a very specific cutscene, in a very specific boss fight. Susie also reported at the time that it was during a boss battle where the PlayStation 5 overheated so much that it turned off completely. So given how specific this issue seems to be to Final Fantasy 16 and to this very specific cutscene and boss battle moment, I'm going to surmise that this isn't a hardware issue. This isn't a PlayStation 5 design flaw, but rather, it seems to be a software flaw that could potentially get patched. All hardware have limitations in terms of how far they can be pushed, and if there's software that's poorly programmed in certain moments or certain functionalities where it causes the hardware to do unusual things, then it's possible for something to happen. So I'm going to surmise that this issue is in that sort of territory, and it's happened to more than one person. Again, Susie, then there's this Reddit user, and then there's this individual right here. This happened to me last night in the exact same spot. And then there's somebody else here who played in performance mode or frame rate mode. No issues so far. But you can see that a bunch of people are reporting that on this exact same spot, this happened to them. Same with this user right here. Mine shut down with overheating message on this same cutscene. So some people did get the overheating message. For others, the overheating happened so fast that the PlayStation 5 didn't have time to warn the player. And here's somebody else for whom this happened on the exact same spot and tried all kinds of ways to try to see if they could get past this cutscene and boss battle without the PlayStation 5 crashing, but to no avail. This just keeps happening no matter what they try. So for some people who are continuously experiencing this, it can be a game-breaking bug. It's literally stopping them from progressing through the game. On Twitter, you'll find a number of users also reporting similar things. Here's Adrian Liu, who said, experienced first ever overheat shutdown for my launch day PS5 while playing Final Fantasy 16. Happened during this cutscene. Few others experienced the same issue. Apparently only graphics mode is affected. Here's Allison Pino. Same scene. Still waiting for a statement from Square regarding the overheating issues. Bought a new PS5, but I still haven't had the courage to test the game on the new device. I think I'm traumatized. Some people are scared that this might damage their console, and that's in part why I'm making a video about this. I'm making sure that people are warned in case they fear that this overheating might result in your PlayStation 5 not being functional. While hardware like this tends to be pretty resistant, you never know what can happen when issues like these arise. So just be careful is what I'm saying. But yeah, plenty of people are assuming that it is a Final Fantasy 16 specific issue. A small cutscene like this should never overheat a PlayStation 5, says this user, and I agree on that front. Now, while the running theory was that only graphics mode causes this, it seems as though there are a handful of reports of performance mode not being able to mitigate this issue. Allison Pino actually tweeted here that in both modes the console turned off during this cutscene, but the first time it happened was during performance 60 FPS mode. So I guess experiences vary from person to person, but for some, switching to performance mode may not fix this issue. And you can see right here footage of exactly what this looks like. The cutscene's playing and the PlayStation 5 just straight up turns off like the plug was pulled from it. And boom, there it is. And if I turn on the volume on this video, you can actually hear the fans ramp up significantly.
Wow.
So that's the issue that some of you might experience if you're among the unfortunate who are afflicted by this. And this user also insists that it's not a dust issue. My PS5 is not full of dust. That's not the reason why it's overheating. It clearly is some kind of software issue that is causing the hardware to behave unusually. And looking back even further before the game came out, there are reports of the Final Fantasy 16 demo causing similar crashes as well from more than 2 weeks ago. So here's a Reddit post that reads, Final Fantasy 16 demo crashes PlayStation 5. I've tried everything from reinstalling the game to cleaning the PS5 of all dust to no success. Even rebuilt database, the game crashes right after confirming the settings. Tried both preference and or performance and graphics mode. You can see right here that a number of people have experienced something similar with the demo. So yeah, this is an unusual circumstance. This has not happened with any other game. But then again, Final Fantasy 16 is one of the few true PlayStation 5 exclusives that really pushes the PS5 hardware. So I've got to wonder if the game is just pushing the PlayStation 5 too much with how much graphics it's trying to get out there. But again, because this issue seems to be so specific to certain moments in the game, I get the sense that this can be patched. So hopefully this is an issue that Square Enix will address and put a patch out and make that public. Let it be known when this issue is fixed so that people will feel safe about their PlayStation 5 console, and also so that people who are stuck in the particular cutscenes or areas of the game where this crash happens will actually be able to progress through the game and beat it, because for some, the issue is bad enough where there's no solution to this. That exact same spot just always results in overheating and crashing. So yeah, this is a pretty urgent issue, and hopefully one that can be looked into, learned from, and not be repeated with future game releases. For now, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the Final Fantasy 16 experience, and whether something like this has happened to you specifically if you bought and played the game. Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
That's crazy. Pretty sure that's happening. C16. The back of the head.
Well, I probably won't be playing 16 anytime soon until they patch that out.
I won't be either, but that's because I don't have a PS5, and I've never really been much for Final. I still need to play Final Fantasy 7. My friend's copy that I've had for over a decade. Oof, that's been a long time in the making. How's this supposed to go?
Seven Remake is really good immo.
Seven Remake Part 1. They released a third of a game and called it a whole game. I don't vibe with that. This is kanji. Oh.
True. Part 2 is coming out soon though.
Oh, right, the store's up there. Okay, okay. Okay, C23. That's the other face. Unicorn mode face. Or mouth plate.
Mister. Heading to bed.
Sleep well.
Verdict scribe. Same.
Alright, y'all have a good night. Thanks for coming out. I'll be back. I'll be building, I don't know, another hour or so. Okay. Okay, there we go. That's how it fits over the top. Okay. And then to change it, you would slide the face out. Took that in. And I guess it, yeah, okay. That's very clever. like building 2 kits at once.
Parker, a character known and loved to many, with a backstory as retold as a certain someone's parents being shot in an alley. Most, whether they are fans or not, know the basics about Peter. Bitten by a radioactive spider, a science nerd, someone who has to balance his superheroing against his daily life. He has a very memorable villain roster and also a very memorable love interest roster. And of course, there's the classic saying, with great power comes great responsibility. The question that's come into play more and more of late, and manifests in different ways, is it time for Peter to grow up? You'll see this brought up in different capacities. Sometimes it'll appear as, should Peter retire, or should there be a mantle pass given over to one of the many other spider people who've arisen over the years? Or should Peter be a dad? And again, maybe either retire or take a back seat, or have the types of adventures change a bit. Peter outgrown his base characterization, and is he being forced back into a base mold he no longer fits? Peter Parker debuted in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in 1962. For simplicity's sake, we'll say he was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. There have been a lot of creation beefs back in the day as to who created what, who created more of what, who had more of an idea, those kind of things, especially around some of the early Marvel characters, although it's also just a comic thing in general, sadly. He was named Spider-Man for a specific purpose, to have a teen hero imbued with the energy of an adult. Whereas most other teen heroes went by a boy moniker or were sidekicks, Peter would stand apart as his own man. He had a very specific formula to start. He was a high school student who had to balance the responsibility of being Spider-Man with that of being Peter. And he would often find that to be extremely difficult, which is where a lot of the personal drama would be derived. After a stint veering into becoming an unlikable Randian archetype under Ditko, Peter found the direction more familiar with under the combo of Stan Lee and John Romita Sr. Comics operate in a kind of forever story mode with a dash of soap opera mixed in. These characters have maintained over time, and so has their universe. And in the case of Marvel, you're dealing less in the realm of countless reboots like when you go over to DC, so it's almost one continual timeline. And even in universes where there are reboots, there's still a sense that despite everything, these characters are moving, they're growing. Little things are changing, and in the case of the teen character like Peter, that meant that he was ever so slowly and subtly growing up, going to university, getting a job, trying to get a career. His personal life was on the move, even if his Spider-Man adventures were remaining largely the same, with just different villains slotting in. The question was still the balance and him coming to accept more and more responsibility, but what that was, his personal life was shifting. As his story went on, so too the tales of his supporting characters, who would come to grow more and more into their own. And the area of his romantic interests, one rose to the top as seeming endgame in the minds of many fans, and through years and adaptations and story direction has, for better or for worse, become essentially the final / best girl for Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Though of course individually some may favor other pairings. And the woman in question is Mary Jane Watson. Starting off as a spoken gag during the Ditko era, just someone who'd be mentioned, Peter has to meet this girl. Then she'd be hidden behind plants and foliage, all leading up to the big unveiling under Romita Sr. in The Amazing Spider-Man 42. And MJ made quite the impression. Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. She wasn't initially designed to be the main love interest. In fact, she was there to spice things up. She was supposed to be a bit of the bad girl, an exciting party girl foil to his what some of the creative teams, namely Lee, wanted to be his endgame of Gwen Stacy. Gwen had a personality plasty. Since her days under Ditko, where she was more antagonistic and hot and cold towards Peter, she transformed after that into a perfect nice girl, and in many ways became quite bland. Much of the work on Gwen occurred after she died. We did a retrospective on Gwen Stacy, which I'll link down below, covering her evolution, and how her death really made people hone in and take a look at her in a way that they hadn't while she was alive. Gwen's death was controversial even back in the day, and not everybody was behind it. Lee stated, "I came back and I found out he had killed Gwen Stacy. I almost killed Jerry Conway. I was just getting ready to go to Europe on some sort of business trip to meet somebody to discuss something about Marvel. And I think I wasn't thinking too clearly, because when they said we'd like to kill Gwen Stacy, I said, well, if that's what you want to do, okay. All I wanted to do was get them out of the office so I could finish packing and get out of there. And when I came back and found out that Gwen had been killed, I thought, why would they do that? Why would Jerry write anything like that? He had an attachment to Gwen as she was lightly mauled off of his own wife. But over the years, fans and some of the writers had come to enjoy MJ more because she just seemed to have a bit more of a personality, more to play with. And some felt that made her a better foil for Peter as she was more interesting. She was fun, liked to go out, was a bit selfish, so that was a flaw she had to work on, but when the chips were down, she was a loyal friend. She had her own dreams. She wanted to be a model and an actress, and so sometimes she didn't even need to or want to hang out with Peter, and that for some made her appealing. She had an independence about her. Also, she just seemed to contrast nicely with both Peter's civilian persona and his Spider-Man persona. Now, of course, that's in the general sense. On an individual level, as mentioned, miles may vary. But their relationship went on and on until the two were linked in marriage. This in 1987 in Spider-Man Annual 21. Now, not everyone behind the scenes at Marvel liked this idea, and also in all fairness, some fans didn't like it either. There was a concern brewing, an anti-marriage sentiment, not just necessarily towards MJ, but anyone. An idea that this would end Peter's relatability, and his adventures would have to change. He would become boring. He was moving too far past base. Joe Quesada, who would become Marvel's EIC, stated, "From the very first day I was in the EIC chair, I made no secret of the fact that I felt that a married Peter Parker wasn't the best thing for an ongoing Spider-Man universe. The problem was that we never had a decent methodology to get ourselves out of it. I always said that if we ever found a way to do it, I would pursue the avenues to get us there. And then I got desperate and had a Satan amalgam take his marriage." These sentiments would remain in play and would manifest decades later in the One More Day storyline. The infamous storyline that would retcon and destroy his marriage. People holding grudges behind the scenes for decades like supervillains. However, before we get there, while Peter and MJ were married, the comics started to flirt with the idea of kids. Peter and Mary Jane having children. There was pregnancy plot during the Clone Saga. MJ found out she was pregnant, but they would end up losing the baby and then just not really talk about it. A bit of a shock value plot line, alongside pregnant and kidnapped. Although pregnancy plot has been said, in the case of MJ's pregnancy, that storyline was itself created to end the marriage. The creators involved only made MJ pregnant because they were planning to reveal that Ben Reilly was the real Peter Parker, and then have MJ and her clone Pete ride off into the sunset and out of the series together. But the idea of Peter being a dad began to take hold. There was What If 105 from 1998, introducing May Parker, aka Mayday Parker, the daughter of Peter and MJ, who grew up not knowing her dad was Spider-Man, only to discover it years later and end up taking on his mantle. This idea would prove so popular there would be an entire line around it and the idea of a next generation of heroes, the MC2. Spider-Girl didn't light the world on fire sales-wise, but she became a fan favorite, and the idea was remembered fondly, and there tends to be people who clamor for the return of Mayday. There is this general sense that this was where Peter's story was headed. Indeed, part of the controversy of One More Day in 2007, aside from the aggressive anti-marriage sentiment, was that it canonically destroyed his daughter, introducing the idea into canon that this was the direction that they were going in, that May was going to exist, and then erasing her. They didn't have to add that part into the story, but they did. Now, the general idea behind this was that this would make Peter more relatable. He could go back to being single and ready to mingle, but there would also be an aggressive return to some of the Parker luck. But then, despite the need to be relatable, he would also later become the CEO of a company. Very relatable. However, fans would start to clamor for a return to his what had been status quo for 20 years of being married to Mary Jane. Although now we're also years out from that. None of these things are happening in a vacuum, and some of the sentiments going on at a company level and a fan level and societally surrounding the fandom culture, they do impact how some of these things play out. Now, Marvel likes to play with this sentiment, flirting, teasing people, releasing alternate universe stories like Renew Your Vows, featuring Peter as a family man having adventures with both MJ and his daughter. And then they'll flirt within the main timeline, like, ooh, are we gonna fix it? Maybe, maybe. Are we gonna do it? And then they don't. Time of recording. Generally in the main universe, he now flits from thing to thing. There'll be some big new shakeup, but then it will tend to fall apart. It'll go back to that classic Parker luck and something really bad will happen to him. He'll be in a coma, he'll lose his girl, he'll end up on Mockingbird's couch. In a way, it becomes a bit like Peter is trapped in a loop. Just that menace wall crawler. Which brings the opening question into stark focus. Has Peter hit that point where his character needs to move into his more adult direction? And for Spider-Man specifically, does that mean being a married father? Some characters grow more over time. One of the most famed examples of this is Dick Grayson, also a teen character, although actually he started off as a child and a sidekick and then would evolve. His transformation is from Robin to Nightwing. At this point, Dick is Nightwing. To make him Robin again would be a regression, a step backwards, and an awkward, unnatural one. One would have to cast about and look for stories to tell. And when people do this, it tends to be stories in other timelines. Dick's arc as it evolved was to grow into his own persona. These characters have been around for a long time and handled by many people, yes, that is true. But some over time start to lend themselves to certain trajectories. They start to carve out certain niches or adventures based on the themes that their characters are centered around. And in Peter's case, that is responsibility and growing to accept it and being able to balance it. And that manifests in his adventures by finding a balance between his family life and his superhero life. And as the stories have gone on, what that is has escalated. There has been more and more and different responsibilities responsibilities on that personal life side. He's done school, he's done dating, even marriage. So the next step in that direction, in that story, in that trajectory would either be children or mentorship / mantle pass. You see this a lot, is that's what happens a lot in some of these outside stories, or when other people come in and try and take them in a direction, like the infamous Abrams and Sons comic, the one where Peter was a deadbeat dad with one hand, a hook hand. It was like ordering the MC2 from Wish. We have Spider Dad at home. Now, some of the fear surrounding Peter as a dad or Peter with a family seems to stem around the general fear in comics that marriage and family are death for a character's ability to be interesting or have adventures, viewed as a closing off of stories rather than opening up of one. Now, of course, not every character should be married and have a family, but it should be on the table for some of them. One can see that with Peter over the years since One More Day, he's been forced into more and more repetitive plots. People seem to be casting about for things to do with him. There are many stories that can be told with him being married and as a father. They can be accents. He can also largely have the same types of adventures, but this will add an extra layer to those adventures. Now he'll have even more things to worry about. Can he make it to his daughter's recital? Do they tell her about his secret identity? How do him and MJ manage both their careers and finding time for each other alongside his superheroing? There are lots of things to fall back on, not all the time, but when his personal life does need to come up. Because it's again about striking that balance between that and his adventuring, both for his theme, but also from a narrative story perspective, because that's what people come to Spider-Man for both, but it needs to be in balance. But you could have many scenarios where it's not just them being kidnapped or put in peril, and you don't even need to mention them all the time. So really, it wouldn't have to be that different from his life beforehand. And if one wanted to, there is always the option of the mantle pass, either to his offspring or to another character. People often suggest Miles, and the animated films Into and Across the Spider-Verse have a lot to do with that, as they showcase how mentorship and passing of the torch while Peter is alive can play out, versus Peter being dead, which they also sort of show. You can get all into this because of the multiverse aspect. And many found that dynamic to be welcome and heartwarming. The push for Miles, or any other character, can be a positive one. It doesn't have to be about displacing Peter, but again about that growth and moving on, the space for more and different stories. It can be done with a respect given to both characters and both eras, showcasing that it doesn't have to be a battle. Or again, he can still remain Spider-Man and just have those different accents. When you get married, you become a parent, your life doesn't end. I say that from experience. Now, in fandom, of course, people can argue about everything. Their fave eras, who should be the endgame girl, who should be the character under the mask, and there are some who take it too far. But when not taken to its extreme, those combos can be fun. It can be part of enjoying the fandom. Alas, time of recording both fan and fan-creator conversations have been quite fraught for some time in certain corners. And some of that is actually played out inside the pages of the comics. Those things have impacted what's gone on, unfortunately. There are some prickly areas around Spider-Man, and the marriage is one of them, and also Miles is another. The multiverse is another. There's just a lot around Spider-Man if you get into certain corners of fandom that is just a bit tense. Though dissecting that would take a lot of time, so we're not going to live there. We're going to move on. Just know that it's a thing. Although for somebody that's like, what are you talking about? There are even some editorially who purposely draw back from moving Peter back in his direction of being married and having a family because of this battle with certain fans. The thing with these battles is that not only do average fans or fans who are unaware of this just get caught in the crossfire, people who just want decent stories, but the characters themselves also get caught up in this. And in the end, nobody wins. Sometimes the only way to win is not to play and just focus on telling a good Spider-Man story. There's an overarching canon with these characters because of the type of medium that they hail from. Starting to sound like Miguel O'Hara. The question is it time to let Spidey pull his Nightwing move? Which in his case seems to be having a family. Time of recording, that's certainly not the norm for comic characters, so it would also be tying back to his roots of being unique in the comic landscape. Where do you think this pushback comes from? People not wanting to see Peter change, editorial grudge, a fear that sales will dip. Although you could do a series of set in the past stories as Marvel currently does. Anti-traditional values, that's just thinking that those things are boring. Want for a different endgame girl. Some combination of all these things, a Frankenstein's monster as it were. There are tons of fun Spidey adventures out there, and there will continue to be so. And I look forward to them. However, I do believe that Spidey would fare better if he was allowed to move in the direction it feels like he's pulling. Again, all ideas could still play out. Doc Ock and his body, being in a coma, and there's Ben Reilly. It could still be interesting or even enhanced by adding that family aspect. These things don't have to make a character boring. There's room for all types of characters. Over the years, new characters have risen up to fill his original niche. And the idea that no one would be able to relate to Peter that way doesn't really hold weight. When even in Across the Spider-Verse of 2023, you can see new fans reacting to and loving Spider-Dad interacting with little Mayday. Family and kids isn't the trajectory for every character, nor should it be. But with Peter's history and themes, it seems to work for him. As other changes just seem to feel like they're moving him back backwards. Although again, miles may vary because for some, that may be their status quo for Peter that they're used to. But if that is the case for you, would you like to see it move forward in that way? I want to hear from all the different areas of fans. Superman seems to have a similar trajectory, and he was able to move forward. People didn't abruptly stop caring about him and open up a whole new comic series for him for a time in the form of the Super Sons. And they're still able to do adventures where he doesn't have that with adaptations or Elseworlds or stories set in the past. So potentially moving Peter in that direction could open up not just new stories for him, but for his entire mythos. But those are just some of my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Do you feel like Spider-Man is stuck in a case of arrested development, or do you disagree entirely? I don't know where I'd like, angry, disagree. Do you disagree? Do you think he needs to remain more close to the core of when he was created, that high school student? Is he more relatable that way? Is all this moving him too far off base? Is it tied to some deep existential dread and fear of death? Is that manifesting in a fictive space? We all have our favorite eras, and sometimes as things go on, characters move into avenues one no longer cares for. Sometimes that can be natural, it can be through bad writing or strange mandates, but nothing stays the same, and that's not always a bad thing. Side note, there's a huge difference between characters changing over time and someone just doing what they want or ignoring history or just trying to prove a point or just going off the rails. There are of course nuances to everything on a case-by-case basis. I want to hear what you think and why. Just tell me about Spidey. Let's celebrate him down below. Thanks so much for taking time today spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it. Please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. Bye-bye.
Something about this isn't fitting together the way I think it should. Where'd your horn go, Unicorn? I have misplaced it. It's the thing that makes you Unicorn. There it is. I guess I built it right. Oh, and I can use PC7. Okay, that's what it is. C17 is my mono horn. These are the transforming horn, and this is the mono exposed horns. Okay. I'll leave it on the sprue for now, but we'll see what I end up doing. Let's see, R1 6 and R1 8 and R1 7.
That prove there's more than one way to transform a car, and there's more than one thing a car can transform into. During an era of exceptionally innovative toy concepts, this one managed to be so far ahead of its time that it was ahead of itself. Sprouting too soon, blossoming too late. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Jace and the Wheeled Warriors. We have covered Jace and the Wheeled Warriors previously back in November of 2017. We're revisiting it here to tell a more comprehensive story and include any developments that may have transpired since. Not to mention the opportunity for a new batch of evil plant jokes.
You sure about that?
Jason the Wheeled Warriors is a toy line and animated series that ran 65 episodes over a single season from September to December of 1985. Developed in part by J. Michael Straczynski, the same guy who worked on She-Ra, Princess of Power,
Policeman.
The Real Ghostbusters,
Haha.
Captain Power, and Babylon 5.
Space
Not many people know
Policeman.
that. A brilliant scientist
show.
named Audric set out with noble
I've honestly never heard
He
of it.
developed an experiment
like
to create
Toy
a
Gal- or
plant
Secret
so
Galaxy.
revolutionary that it would end starvation forever,
Space
which he did do
Policeman.
after determining the
Lots
optimal
of
location in
interesting
a
info.
distant galaxy, a planet surrounded by 4 suns. As he put the finishing touches on his creation, one of the nearby suns went supernova, showering the planet with cosmic radiation, causing the plants in his laboratory to mutate into anthropomorphic plant monsters with brains. Evil. Audric and his childlike assistant, Oon, fled the ruthless creatures. The horrible new species of sentient beings were dubbed the Monster Minds due to their monstrous appearance and their evil minds.
That was a freebie.
Led by Sawboss, they possessed the ability to transform into evil plant-based cars. The Monster Minds claimed Audric's lab as their own and set about to consume the planet's natural resources. In defiance of his new green overlord, Audric created a new plant, a root that could destroy the Monster Minds once and for all, and ordered Oon to deliver half of it to his son, Jace. To help him on his way, Gillian also told Jace about a small band of heroes from long ago who guided them to victory in desperate times. They were called the Lightning League. Their leader wore a magic ring, which Gillian now gives to Jace. As long as his heart and purpose are pure, Jace can use the magic ring to do pretty much whatever he needs it to do once per episode. Coincidentally, Gillian, who can build and repair anything, made a fleet of tactical vehicles Jace can command, and so the Lightning League is reborn. With that, the new Lightning League sets off to find Audric, reunite the halves of the root, and defeat the evil Monster Minds. In 1984, Mattel was rocketing to the top of the action figure market with one of their biggest hits ever, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Mattel created the incredibly successful toy line in 1982 with sales increasing year over year and established the template for marketing toys to kids with a syndicated animated series in 1983. A template that every other toy company would attempt to follow, and one that Mattel themselves would apply to other products of their own. In 1984, Mattel released Wheeled Warriors, a line of vehicles with modular parts and tiny cockpits with pilots dressed in semi-formal military attire, 5 good vehicles called the Lightning League, and 5 evil vehicles called the Monster Minds. Each pilot looked pretty much the same, basic features enough to tell that they were humans driving these space machines. The Monster Minds were just that, evil monster brains.
Okay, so to transform into destroy mode, the head, you have to pop these parts off.
Making the entire car a brain-powered sentient creature. Each of the vehicles featured exchangeable parts, weapons, wheels, tank treads, missile launchers, as well as the chassis themselves. It was left to you to choose the best weapons to win. The good Lightning League vehicles, Armed Force, Drill Sergeant, Quick Draw, Spike Trike, and the huge walking carrier vehicle Trailblazer are referred to by their vehicle names, but the drivers weren't given specific identities, just driver. The Monster Mind characters as sentient vehicle creatures are referred to by their brain names, Sawboss,
Slide the face forward.
Tank, and their own walking carrier vehicle, Beast Walker. Like Mattel's Masters of the Universe before them, Wheeled Warriors toys included brief fold-out mini-comics that established the battle between the Monster Minds and the Lightning League. But the emphasis in the comics was on the play structure of the interchangeable parts, specifically the stack and attack gimmick and the good versus evil dynamic. To promote the line, Mattel partnered with French animation studio Deke Audio Visual to develop a cartoon. Deke already had an impressive portfolio with shows like Inspector Gadget, The Get Along Gang, Kids Video, Pole Position, Rainbow Bright, and Heathcliff. All Deke had was the general premise established by Mattel, the rest was up to them. And that new mythology was developed in part by writers who previously worked on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
The battle continues. Don't go away.
You can make the good guys better. Battle Face. Lightning League Battle Face. You put it together. Wheeled Warriors. Quick change and fight.
And you put the head and you put the back pieces, the side pieces back on. Okay.
You can stack, and attack with Wheeled Warriors. Quick change and fighting machines. Lightning League Battle Base. Vehicles each sold separately. Some parts not for use with some toys. New from Mattel. And now back to Jace and the Wheeled Warriors.
See, in
1983, J. Michael Straczynski was looking for work. As a journalist ready to move on from journalism, he took a chance and submitted a script to Filmation, producers of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. He'd seen something in that series that
Look, it's
appealed
missing
to him.
something.
According to Straczynski in his 2019 autobiography, Becoming Superman, quote, "Despite the presence of a talking green tiger and a legless floating imp named Orko, the science fiction aspects of the show were unusually well thought out, which told me that somebody writing the show knew a lot about
It seems like it's missing something there.
That somebody was Larry DiTillio. Filmation bought Straczynski's script and several others, eventually hiring him on as a full-time staff writer, at which time he and DiTillio became friends and friendly competitors, challenging each other in a battle of who could do the fastest, the most, and the best work on their scripts. Filmation liked their work so much that the duo were selected to develop She-Ra, Princess of Power, a literal sister series spinning off from the success of He-Man. But it came with a catch. Straczynski and DiTillio wouldn't get official credit for their work, and therefore no residuals on the series or all of the millions of dollars worth of licensed products that would be created from it. On top of that, they were going to have to make their ideas fit the new guidelines imposed on them by standards and practices as a result of the perceived violence in Masters of the Universe. Even with those limitations, Straczynski and DiTillio continued to develop She-Ra because they enjoyed the work. They spent most of their time trying to reshape the scripts coming in from freelancers who had trouble adapting to She-Ra's voice from He-Man's. Eventually, they both decided they wanted more credit and asked for it. Just credit, not money. Filmation said, how about no? Unwilling to compromise, Straczynski and DiTillio quit. It was unemployment that landed both of them at Deke, who were looking for writers just like them for a new show based on a different Mattel toy line, now known as Jace and the Wheeled Warriors. They joined a production where the writers weren't invested in the material, seemingly just there to collect a paycheck and get it over with. Writers that paid no mind to the absurdity of the premise and the implausibility of the physics involved with cars that can drive from planet to planet on routes that stretch for millions of miles. That's roots, not roots. The plant roots, not the pavement roots. But Straczynski and DiTillio were interested in building a coherent world as much as they could, creating characters with motivation, reasons for things happening, setup and payoff. Even if they couldn't completely reinvent the concept from scratch, even if the characters were derivative of Star Wars, even if there was no getting around the necessity of incorporating the toys and play features. Straczynski's 13 scripts and DiTillio's 7 accounted for almost a third of the 65-episode total. Deke head Jean
Okay,
Chalopin,
that appears to be
story
one
editor,
unicorn
Aston
head.
Martin, 2 dozen other writers filled in the rest. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors theme song titled Keep On Rollin' was performed by Nick Carr, frequently credited by fans as one of the best theme songs ever. More importantly, it's one of the dozens of 80s cartoon theme songs written by Saban and Shuki Levy, who were really only competing against themselves. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors was first broadcast in France, followed shortly thereafter in the US in September of 1985. It aired daily in syndication through December. Despite a continuing narrative built around the quest to find Jace's father, Audric, the series was canceled, and the final episode ends with that mission unresolved. Straczynski left Jace and the Wheeled Warriors after being made an offer by Deke head Jean Chalopin that he couldn't refuse. Story editor for both the daily syndicated and weekly animated series based on the hit 1984 feature film Ghostbusters. Straczynski's departure may have been a deciding factor in the cancellation of Jace and the Wheeled Warriors. More likely, it was the fact that even before the series began production, sales of the toys were already underwhelming. A second wave of toys was in early development that would have been more representative of the animated series characters, but it never made it into production. Perhaps the disconnect between the mythology of the toys and the cartoon was too significant for consumers to overcome. When kids looked for Jace, Oon, Flora, and Herc in the toy aisle, they found none, spending their dollars on Transformers, G.I. Joe, and He-Man instead. Straczynski has since stated that an animated movie was in the works that would have resolved the ending to the season-long story, and he should know he wrote the script. Jace and the new Lightning League coming face-to-face with the old Lightning League, finding Audric, death, despair, bringing the roots together, and defeating the monster minds once and for all. But once the plug was pulled on the toys, the show and the movie were dead. From 1994 to 1995, a decade after it was canceled, Jace and the Wheeled Warriors returned to television on the USA Cartoon Express on the USA Network. 20 years after that, the entire series was released on DVD in a box set by IDP Home Video. In 2018, Mill Creek Entertainment released the entire series again on DVD. You can purchase it digitally from online streaming services or watch most of it here unofficially on YouTube. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors.
Okay, so that's the head. That was a very intricate head. Most Gundam heads are, from my experience, like 3, 4 pieces, maybe 5. I don't know. Aerial might have had a few, but.
You sure about that? But don't look to J. Michael Straczynski for news, information, or hope. Deke's library has bounced around over the last 30 years from Saban to Disney to Wild Brain Entertainment, But what never changed was the fact that Deke never credited Straczynski or any of the writers for their contributions to the show. Straczynski has referred to Jace in his list of franchises
build an
that
arm.
are dead to him. As he put it in a series of 2020 tweets, quote, "Here's why everyone who wrote on Jace has a problem with it. Like the others, I came
I'll build
into
one
Jace
arm.
with the promise of single credit
That's what I'll do.
episodes which would show who wrote what. This would make it possible for us to receive not just credit for what we did, but foreign levies, which were created specifically to protect writers. But once everything was done, the studio removed the names of all the writers, so the studio was the only author, which meant that all the foreign levies, monies, residuals would go to the studio rather than the writers those provisions were created to protect. It was an utterly shameless move and is why when you watch the shows now, there are no individual or in many cases even group writer credits." End quote. Please, for God's sake, leave this man alone. Search his tweets. Stop asking him the same questions. You're never getting the adult version where the car's If there's a future for Jason the Wheeled Warriors, it's certainly not with J. Michael Straczynski involved. Jason the Wheeled Warriors was an obscure show built around a play gimmick that was designed to make it stand out on the shelf, if not on television. A mythology that relied on character archetypes that viewers would have recognized from other franchises, and a business model that
I'm going to call it there for
the
tonight.
very people who were trying
I felt
to shape it into something
force
that
went
had
ahead.
value to the people
I think that's plenty.
to watch.
It's a very complicated build.
Thursdays, am I right? Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, if you would like early access to the videos ad-free, as well as behind-the-scenes features, sneak peeks at upcoming projects, and exclusive monthly podcasts.
I'm going to get something to compare it with.
Visit our Patreon at patreon.com/ToyGalaxy, and let us know in the comments down below if you'd be willing to drive a car made out of plants. Not a car with a brain, just a car made out of plants. It's safe to assume in this scenario that the plant car meets all federal motor vehicle safety standards. Impact tests, seat belts, etc. Also, it's not evil. It could become evil, but from the beginning, it's not. Your mileage may vary. Perfect. You can take out my phone and post, right? I'll take it out and post. Clap. What the?
Alright, I'm back. So, what I got for comparison purposes is the RX-78. aka the Grandpa Gundam, colloquially. MG, my only other master grade. Just gonna do the size comparison here. Torso actually seems to be a little bit smaller. I don't know. I don't know why I'm don't know why I'm reluctant to attach the head, but I just kind of want to avoid that till the end. So, yeah, in Unicorn mode, it seems to be a little bit smaller than the RX-78 there. This is with the non-core fighter component in there. I can't exactly do a good comparison. But yeah, let me just stick that on there. I don't really know how to transform the chest at this point. I guess I can try. Okay, let me skip forward the instructions and see if I can figure out the chest transformation without breaking this thing into a billion pieces. Backpack unit. Weapons. Okay, torso. Doesn't show you how to do the torso. Oh, here it is. Okay. Destroy mode. Pop this thing up in the back. Pull out the... Not that far. Push that down, pull out these things in the back. Slide these out. This is definitely not a kit that's going to get transformed much. I see what they were saying on the reviews. Maybe it would help if I had arms attached to it. I don't know. Kind of doubt it. Oh, right. That's because the joint on this one is right there. Let's see. Is this here the same size? No. Fine. I was trying to see if I could do a thing, but it won't let me do a thing. This old thing really shows its age. I know when I built this, there was a slide in there of some kind. now it's not sliding. Keep the arms in waist attached while transforming. Maybe that's what it is. I need to have the arms attached in order to transform it for the leverage. So I guess I will just not transform it right now. Okay. Scratch that. Anything I can do? Can you pull up the cockpit? Yes, you can pull up. You can up the cockpit at least. See Banaji in there. I think my shoulders brushed the camera, and I apologize. Anyway, that'll do it for tonight, folks. Thank you all very much for coming out. I'll be back probably tomorrow night to build the arms and maybe the pelvis. We'll see where I end up. And we'll keep it up after that. Who knows? But thank you for coming out to Free Build Friday. I have been King Kuga. This has been the Master Grade Unicorn Gundam, head and torso. Thank you very much.